welcome, and let me introduce you first. So Rasmus is an international basketball player, played for the Danish national team, is Australian and Danish,
Correct,
and
yep.
has played for the, let me get that right in terms of the pronunciation, the Randers Cimbria in the Danish Basketball League.
Yeah, Randers Cimbria.
All right. Well, not even close.
It was close. It was close.
And the Fort Lewis College. And he is currently playing for the New Zealand Breakers in the National Basketball League.
Yep. Sure am.
Welcome to the SPRTER Podcast, Rasmus.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit here today.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on. And before we get started, I also want to mention that Rasmus has set up his experience store on the SPRTER app. So lots of awesome experiences that you can check out with him. Personal question and answers, Zoom calls, signed pictures, all of those cool things to really foster the connection with Rasmus and learn more about him. So let's get started. How did you start playing basketball?
I was just kind of with my friends in Australia, and I was playing rugby for a while there. And then one of my buddies was just like, "Hey, like you're pretty tall, like you gotta try basketball." So went out there and was pretty good at it. So kind of stuck with it ever since then. Okay,
so your friend just said, "Look, try," and I mean, height goes a long way in basketball. I played until I was 14 and I stopped growing. So that was the end of my career there. When did you know that you had that special talent where you're like, hey, I actually think I can, go to college, get, make it pro? What's that realization?
I think it's different for everyone. Some it comes early and some it comes later. For me, it was kind of in the middle. So I started playing around I was eight years old. And then when I was 11, I made the state team in Australia. So they have this like big competition every year where there's 9 states in the country, and only 12 players make the team for each state, and then there's a national tournament. So I was fortunate enough at 11 to make the Queensland state team, and it was right around there, 11 years old, I realized, hey, like I'm pretty good at this. Like I might be able to do something special with this, and that's what my parents were telling me as well. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Awesome. And where in Queensland are you from originally?
Brisbane, Queensland.
Love Brisbane. I spent 5 years on the Gold Coast, so
not much better place than the Gold Coast.
Well, besides where you're at the moment in New Zealand.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I only got a month there this season. We'll probably get into that a little bit later in the podcast, but it was a crazy year.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more about that. And from that state team, how did you then decide to make that jump over to the US? Because, I mean, that's a big leap as well.
Yeah, so it kind of went twofold for my family. My dad, he was working for a IT company at the time, and he had a job offer over in the US, and he kind of brought it to the family and was like, hey, like I have this opportunity, but I want my brother and my mom to be on board. And we also looked at it as like me, like, hey, Raz, like if you want to take basketball seriously, like the US is probably the place to be. So that's kind of what obviously didn't make the decision for our family, but it was one of the reasons we considered going there.
Okay, that's great. And how did you then decide to play for Fort Lewis? How did that come about?
I had not very many scholarship offers coming out of high school. I had some walk-on offers for some D1s in Texas. And then just all of a sudden got a phone call out of the blue. It was actually one of my friends who went to a rival high school. He had committed there, and his dad told the head coach of that school, like, hey, have you heard of this guy? And they're like, yeah, we thought he was signed. And I wasn't. So they called me and offered me a scholarship the next day, and I was pretty much on board. Durango, Colorado is also one of the more beautiful places I've been.
Yeah, it's certainly not an awful place to live for a while. That's for sure. Nice. And then coming back to Australia, what was that decision after university?
So yeah, after college, it was actually going to Denmark first to play, and that was the contract offer I got after I got done playing. And I was super excited because actually my whole family still lives there, grandparents, aunts, uncles, nephews. So for me, it was kind of like a homecoming, and most of my family hadn't seen me play basketball before. So it was pretty special to get to do that for 2 years. And I was also had met my wife, and we just got married. So to take her overseas with me was pretty special as well to my home country.
That's great. And I can see that being close to the family and really connecting with them again and reconnecting. That sounds phenomenal. Now, you represented Denmark and other clubs in Denmark. How was that from a cultural shift from Australia to the US to Denmark from a cultural perspective? How is that different?
You know, they're all very different countries in terms of, I guess, culture and how they act in the day-to-day. But in terms of just people, they're very similar, just good people that work hard and are very open-minded. So, you know, I'd moved 3 countries by the time I was 12 years old. So once I graduated college, it was nothing new for me to leave one country and go start a life somewhere else.
So you always had to start being open-minded and experience.
Yeah. You know, I get the question all the time. Like, it's kind of a normal question for people, like, oh, where are you from, when you just meet someone? And I always kind of laugh, and it's like, good question. Like, I'm a world citizen is what I tell most people. So
no, that's awesome. That's a great answer. Yeah. And having lived in so many places, I could absolutely see that. That's great. Now, when you grew up, what were some of your role models from an athletic perspective? What athletes did you look up to?
Well, first there was my parents. Both of my parents played in the Sydney 2000 Olympics, and they represented Australia in European handball, which for most people, if you're from the US, you probably have never heard of that sport, but very, very big sport in Europe. And, so yeah, they were probably my main role models. I'd seen them do it at the highest level, and they were always pushing me to be better. And, you know, that classic sports parents, like, you know, I had a good game, but it was never quite good enough. So that always motivated me. And then by the time I got to college, my role models were just older teammates, upperclassmen that were very good players, and to this day are still playing professionally, to name a few: Nick Tomzik, Alex Herrera, DeAndre Lansdowne. Those 3 guys went to my school and are still playing pro today. So I still keep in contact with them, and are definitely people I, you know, aspire to be. They've had like 8+ years, 10+ years playing in Europe. So
that's awesome. And having that close community and that network of other athletes, great to connect well. If you got questions, or how do you do that? How do you deal with these type of aspects? That totally makes sense. Now, how different is it from playing for the club team versus playing for the national team?
Yeah, so I guess a little clarification on the national team. I've been a part of the 15 roster, but haven't made the final 12 cut. So technically I haven't suited up to play, but I've been practicing and been to games, and just, you know, haven't yet had the chance to sit on the bench for a game. But being with a national team compared to a club team is very different. I think egos get set aside. You know, when you play for a club team, guys are there in general to get better and move on. Like you know, you start at the league I started in Denmark. I knew my goal was to get to the Australian league, you know, so selfishly, like, yes, I wanted to win and do well for my team, but I was also looking ahead at the bigger picture. Whereas in the national team, guys are there because, one, they want to be there, and, you know, they want to win for their country. So you kind of have this real tight, you know, knit community that just comes together and plays hard.
Now, and I mean, honestly, I think part of the 15, to me, that's a national team. You get called up, that's a national team.
Yeah, so, thank you.
And I mean, that's certainly a really good insight, as in, hey, I can set aside my personal career goals. And I mean, obviously, scoring on the national team level is probably still pretty damn good for your career.
Yeah.
But in the end, you probably much rather lift a trophy than being the one-person man of the match. But, well, the whole team lost. And
yeah. I mean, so you see guys that come in that, you know, maybe are just role players on their club team, and then they come in and they're the star on the national team. So that's what's pretty cool about it too.
And that's awesome. That's great insight. I've not really thought about that aspect yet. Now we got a segment that we call Pro Advice, where at Pro Advice, we really ask some of our followers what they want to know from you in particular. So we had a few submissions, and the first one reads, recently joined a travel team as my dad wanted me. I'm not sure I'm ready for that, so I'm afraid of letting him down. What should I do? How can I deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm probably assuming this guy is young or girl, starting sport. Yep, guy, okay, and they're young. Yeah, that's tough. I think at the end of the day, you have to do what makes you happy, no matter how difficult that may seem to tell your parents. if you personally feel that the travel team is too good and you won't play very much, then just tell your parents, hey, I'd rather play on a team where I get to play than sit on a team that's very good and wins, because you're not going to develop if you don't play. So even if your dad has a connection, or, you can get on this really great travel team, but you don't play and that's not fun, then, just tell them, hey, I want to play, even if it's on a worse team, because you're actually going to be better off doing that. So yeah, you got to do what makes you happy. And if you don't want to play, then you just have to tell them that you can't do something that, doesn't make you happy.
No, that's great, good advice. And particularly that playtime seems like a really good argument, as in, hey, now, particularly growing up, it's really the time on the field that matters more. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Awesome advice. Second submission. I want to play sport in college, but I don't know how to reach out to college coaches. What advice do you have in terms of communicating with them?
Yeah, another great question. Well, I'll give you a personal example. What I did when I was a junior, or before my junior year of high school, or actually, before my senior year of high school, during the summer, got together about 15 to 20 packets. And in that packet, I had a CD, burnt disc that had film on it. I had like an elevator speech letter that just said, hey, this is me. This is who I am. These are my stats. And then just contact information and a schedule of my high school games and my upcoming summer games. And I probably sent 15 to 20 of them, and I only got 3 responses. But one of the responses was, hey, like, come to our summer camp. And 2 responses was like, hey, thank you, we'll keep an eye. So, and yeah, they didn't turn into anything, but that's probably your best way if you feel like you're getting no contact from college coaches, is just pick 20 schools that are in your area or that you want to go to, and you never know what can happen. So just, reach for the sky on that one.
All right, shoot for the sky. And I mean, you said a burned CD. Now it's probably even easier, as in, hey, upload all of this to, say, Dropbox or Google Docs and create a folder there. So, but you're saying be proactive in terms of marketing yourself. Okay, awesome. That's great advice then as well. Now let's get into some teammates and some of those aspects. Obviously, you've been part of a lot of different teams so far in terms of that great experience. What were your thoughts from going from Denmark to Australia, and how's that different in terms of the teams there versus the team in Australia and now New Zealand?
Yeah. In the beginning, I was, kind of like shell-shocked. Like, I didn't feel like this was really happening, because it had always been my dream as a kid to play in the NBL. So when I first got there, I was very nervous, and, because this was my test. This was like, okay, do I belong in this league? Like, it's now or never. It's kind of like that, the shining moment. Like, this is what I'd been waiting for. So I guess once I got there and I got in the first game and hit my first shot, it was like, oh, okay, like this, it's basketball. This is what I've done my whole life. So that was pretty cool. But the big difference, I would say, from the Danish league to like the Australian league is just the depth. In the Australian league, a roster of 12, you have 12 guys. You can go to the 12th guy and he's a good player. Like, he can play, he can contribute. Where in the Danish league, you might only have 7 to 8 guys that you really like can trust that, they're going to perform every night. And so that's the difference. It's just the depth, and obviously the overall size and money that goes into the league as well, which helps bring in better players.
No, that makes a lot of sense in terms of that depth, and we see that with a lot of other leagues, and how like the top 5, they always compete, but then once you start into rotating through, I can absolutely see that. Now, what's one of your favorite moments with a teammate? And it doesn't have to be on the field, but what's one of your favorite moments that you always remember and cherish?
Just with one teammate in particular, or?
Yeah, with one teammate in particular.
I think it actually maybe have to come from this season. And sorry, I guess if there's any former teammates watching that has a moment, but it's hard to on the spot remember everything. This year we had a really tough season, and our record, was about 2-7, and we got to a game and we were down 1, clock was running down, and our captain, Tom Abercrombie, just caught it off a rebound. I mean, his whole body was turned and threw it up, and it went in, and we won the game, and I was right behind him and just like hugged him, and our whole team just came off the bench, and we were just in this huge, like, emotional, like, screaming pit, because we'd gone through so much struggle, and then to hit that game winner kind of was like, okay, like, oof, we got through some toughness. So yeah, I guess my favorite moment I can remember right now is the game winner by Thomas Abercrombie.
That's a sounds like particular. You mentioned that struggle before.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume some of that is in relation to the lockdowns and the COVID situation, or
Yeah. So when I signed with New Zealand, I mean, I thought I was going to New Zealand, but then I didn't realize the border between New Zealand and Australia had closed. So the New Zealand Breakers had to be based out of Melbourne. And that was going to be like not too bad if we had to just stay in one city. But what ended up happening was a couple cases popped up here and there in the city of Melbourne. So then our team had to move, and then a team had to move again. So we basically, for 5 months this season, we're just living in hotels, changing hotels every 2 weeks. And we didn't get any home games until the last month of the season, where luckily the border opened and we were able to get 7 games. So,
I mean, it's great that we moved to that point where you're able to be in New Zealand and have those home games. Now, being on the road, being in such an uncertainty, it seems like, I would assume that's very emotionally draining. Can you elaborate a little bit more what's going on with the team during those moments? And
yeah, sure.
And yourself as well?
For myself, I think I was in kind of a state of like euphoria. Like I had like gotten to the league, like everything was better for me. Like, okay. The money was better, the professionalism of the league was better, the players were better, the equipment was better. So I didn't mind moving around so much. It was tough on my wife. Of course, she worked a full-time job. And that was kind of where I think for other guys, everyone in this league is, they have wives and kids. So they had to be away from their families for months and months on end. And the whole, I think I wouldn't call it an issue, but the whole topic of mental health has been huge in our sports in the last year or so, the last 2 years. And you could really see the impact firsthand of guys just like really struggling and their performance hurting simply because they can't have a home cooked meal with their family, or, they can't hug their wife or kids. So, it was just on a daily basis. It was kind of checking in on guys and kind of seeing, okay, like, do I need to try to go out of my way to pick up their energy because, they're missing their normal people in their lives that do that for them.
I can absolutely see that. I mean, living in hotels, and we've seen and heard a lot about mental health. And I mean, it's a good thing that mental health is actually getting addressed now in sport, because for years and decades, it just never was like, yeah, suck it up. You getting paid millions of dollars,
exactly,
or
yeah.
Like you have all this great salary and you're so famous, and like just play. I can absolutely see that, as in, okay, well, now at least we're addressing it, but we're still quite far away for us as a society from understanding.
Yeah, I think a lot of players this year like had that internal conversation with them, like, is this worth it? Like, I love sport, I love basketball, but is this worth being away from my family? And we had a teammate that made that decision to go home about a third of the way through the season. And I mean, there was no like hard feelings towards him. I mean, yeah, we needed him, but family first. So.
Okay. No, and I can, that's got to be difficult, and it's good on the team to say, hey, we understand, but it's, those are tough decisions. I wouldn't want to be in that situations. From something that's difficult and emotionally draining to something a lot more lighter. And that's our locker room banter segment. So in the locker room banter, we're asking you to share a moment with a teammate. It's like anything that happens in the locker room, any sort of ritual, crazy story, anything from behind the scenes.
I guess, I got some good ones from college. And they're actually kind of like always right after the season. We always kind of had this ritual where we would, obviously the underage drinkers wouldn't be there, but we would bring in a bottle of, 2 bottles of whiskey after the season and just kind of sit in the locker room and divulge and sit. And, we knew some guys wouldn't come back as seniors, or, sometimes guys would transfer. So we'd always just kind of have a few drinks and enjoy each other's company.
That's nice, and that team building even at the end of the season, as in, hey, we're not going to see you for a while. That's great. Now, when you think of the new age of centers we're seeing in the NBA now, is it necessary for a center to be able to shoot from anywhere on the court? What's your evaluation?
Necessary? No. I mean, you look at guys like Rudy Gobert, DeAndre Jordan, Bam Adebayo, Steven Adams, Kiwi. So shout out to New Zealand. Those guys, they do their job at such a high level and they don't shoot outside the paint. So no, you don't need to necessarily be able to shoot. Does it help? Yes. But if you can't shoot, then you better be the best rebounder on the floor. You better be the most energetic guy, And just because you can't shoot, like I think Rudy Gobert, DeAndre Jordan, and Adebayo, you notice they have really good hands and very good touch around the rim. So you still need to have, some type of shooting touch close to the rim.
Okay. So, I mean, we see it that some Australians can perform world class without being great shooters. So I can see that evaluation. So how do you see the role of the guard changing in basketball over time?
Over time, I mean, I think you're just going to see the three-point shot become even more of a factor. Guards today, they all can shoot threes. You might have one on the floor that can't, but in general, you see Stephen Curry and what he's doing today shooting, and Damian Lillard shooting from just in front of half court. Like, it's going to get to the point where players just get better and better shooting from deep. So, there's going to be way more 2-point shots from guards than I think as the game evolves.
Do you think that statistics and analytics play a role there? And do you talk about that with the team?
I think that depends on the coach. But no, I don't know if statistics or analytics, it does play a role in it because it's worth more points. And, if, like, for example, for me this year, I shot 40% from 3 and I think 45% from 2. So it's kind of like, what's the point of Raz shooting a 2 if he's almost the same percentage? But I just think like the floor is so spaced because guys can shoot, and if you're open, a 3-point shot is almost better than a layup, even if you miss that 3-point shot because he's open, and everyone, most guys are shooting between high 30s and low 50s.
I mean, 40 on 3 is pretty damn good. So
yeah.
I would take that.
I had a pretty nice shooting year. So which is ironic because my senior season, I think I only shot like 29% from the 3-point field. I had a real struggle that season, just like mentally. I kind of lost it. So I worked pretty hard these last 2.5 years to get it back. And
doing it at a much higher level as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's pretty impressive.
My teammates helped a lot. They gave me a lot of confidence over the last 2 years. So
nice. That's great to have that support system there as well. We got another segment which we call Break the Rules. Now, in breaking the rules, we're asking you to change one rule in basketball that you think would make the sport better.
One rule, huh? Yep. Not allowed to say 3.
I mean, bring it. We're done with 3.
So, no, okay. The one rule I think, and you can do it in Europe, but you can't do it in the NBA, but I'd really like to see in the NBA the goaltending. To be thrown away because they have that imaginary cylinder that goes up from the rim. Whereas in Europe, when the ball hits the rim, if it bounces up, a player can smack it away. And I think in the NBA that then they've taken away the ability, like they have the most athletic players in the world in the NBA. And it would be incredible to see guys like DeAndre Jordan, Rudy Gobert, just really show their skills of being a defender. And, once a ball bounces up, smacking it away. And a lot of people don't understand. It's like if the ball bounces and hits the rim and starts like swirling in, you can't touch it. It's only if the ball like hits and kind of bounces upward, then they're allowed to like smack it away. So that would be a cool rule, I think, for the NBA because you'd really get to see some players' abilities kind of shown a little more.
I like that rule because I think that's going to get really exciting.
Yeah,
there's probably some.
You see it in Europe. It's big. I had a game in my first season in Denmark where our player shot a free throw and it was to tie the game, and the opposing team, it bounced up and he smacked it away. And for a second I looked at the ref and I was like, oh wait, he's allowed to do that. And you couldn't really be mad at it, but like that's good for that guy. Smart on his part.
All right. That's a great rule. Now you said you got 3. Do you want to throw in?
My other rule, I think it's not so much a rule, but just consistency with officiating. I think the defender doesn't get entitled to his space as much as he should be allowed. Like you see a lot of times an offensive player will lean out of their way to create the contact. And to me, that's an unnatural movement. It is smart. Like players like James Harden have taken advantage of it and bravo to him. I mean, he's taken the game into his own hands, but I think the defender needs to be entitled to their space a little bit more. So I don't know if that's a rule, is more of just a way of officiating the game.
Okay. No, I think, I mean, it's probably not a rule, but in terms of officiating, you're absolutely right. I think it would go a long way in improving that consistency. And I mean, the game can only be as good as the structure that it's placed in. So that exactly. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
We do have one last segment before we get into rolling it out. So a little bit of a fun segment, which we call the hat trick. And we pull out 3 questions from a hat. And the first one is, do you have any superstition or specific pregame routine?
Any superstition? No, not so much a superstition. In this past year, I've gotten the habit of just taking a moment of silence to myself. I started that in Denmark this past season, and then also in New Zealand. And, so it's becoming a habit for me. And I think if I didn't do it, I would probably feel a little funky. I'd probably have to take a second on the bench to just do it by myself.
Okay. And what does that mean to you? Why are you doing it?
To me, it's more of like I'm kind of praying and just, thanking God for the opportunity and the blessings. And I also pray for the health and safety of all the other players and that we all get out of this game safe. And, it's just being like in the moment and being thankful because I truly don't know when my last game will be, and it could be that game. So, and if that is, then that taking that moment of silence and praying just kind of also sets my mindset like, hey, like you got to give it all you got because it might be your last.
Wow. I did not expect that, but I really like that altruistic perspective as well. As in, it's not just like, hey, get me a 45%, shooting throw.
It's hard. It's hard because it's still something I notice after a game. I'm like, I probably could have played a little harder. And I'm fortunate I'm still young. I'm 25 and can hopefully play for another 5 to 8 to 10 years if I'm fortunate. But it's definitely a tough mindset to just really give it everything you have. So I'm still working on that.
Okay. No, I mean, if you look at LeBron, he's how old is he now? 37, 37. I mean, you got a few years ahead of you.
Yeah.
Second question. Who was your toughest opponent ever?
My toughest opponent ever. That is a good question. I guess I have to say professional because that wouldn't make much sense if I didn't.
Could have been at that point.
Yeah, I guess at that point, if I take it at that point, it would have been Justice Winslow, who I'm not sure if he still plays for the Miami Heat. He might have gotten traded, but he played for a team called Houston Hoops in summer AAU, and I was a 16-year-old, and I mean, he was just a man amongst boys at that point. He was fully grown, muscles, and putting his head at the rim. So that was definitely Justice Winslow would have been my toughest opponent.
Okay, awesome.
I actually saw a comment at the bottom here from one of my friends, Derek White. Yeah, that's probably the best one for college as well. Plays for the Spurs. So.
Okay. Did you play with John
Shout out
Bundy?
to John Bundy. High school. Yeah, I did. He's a good friend of mine. So shout out John Bundy.
So John Bundy wasn't it?
Sadly, no. He got the brunt of I was probably his toughest opponent.
Okay. Double shout out to John then. Last question on the hat trick. If you could meet any athlete in the world right now, who would it be?
Oh, it would have to be LeBron James. He's always kind of been one of my favorite players, and I think I would actually enjoy meeting him and talking to him more about like life so than basketball. I mean, the basketball conversation would be amazing, but just to see what he does off the court and, how he handles himself and everything he does in the community and him as a business person would be pretty cool to just kind of pick his brain on that.
That's, I totally agree. I would, if you get the chance, I mean, I'll let
you know.
Let me know. I'll fly in for sure. Right now we've covered about half an hour. I'm want to be cognizant of your time. So anything you want to add to what we haven't covered? I mean, we've only scratched the surface, but I really
Yeah.
appreciate those insights. You've gone deep in some sections, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, no, not much. Just, I guess, thank you to like my parents. They've been huge role models for me, obviously being Olympian athletes. I think that's kind of like my big motivator is, I want to be better than them. I would love to get to the Olympics one day, and, Denmark would have a tough road ahead of them. I don't know if they've ever qualified for the Olympics as a basketball team. So that's kind of a small goal of mine, or I guess big goal.
Well,
And then, yeah, just, thanks to my wife who she sacrificed a lot for me this year, and to all the basketball wives and any wife of any athlete. I think how much we appreciate what you guys do for us, because, some of them have to put off their dreams for a little while to let the athlete kind of do what they do, because we can only do what we do in this, short time period that we have at the peak of our athletic ability. So, yeah, shout out to all the live athletes out there.
And the parents. I mean, great shout outs. They're much appreciated, I'm sure. And I totally agree. It's the support system that we got to be thankful for, whether it's the sport or where we're at in life. It doesn't come as just from us. So I really appreciate those insights.
Yeah,
it's really nice.
I think if I can add one more thing, I actually
Sure.
think as I'm getting a little older and learning about just sport and life in general, once you get to a certain level, I think even college, it kind of gets to that point, but the pro level for sure, it's all a mental game at that point. There's only, yes, you can improve your strength a little bit. Yeah, you can improve like your vertical jump, but you kind of have the skills. And at that point, to any athletes that are watching, really start working on your mental game, like meditate, do some, reading about it, because that's what I've noticed has helped me perform as well as I did this year in the NBL. Is I was just mentally, I think, strong and prepared to handle that. So yeah, make sure you're taking care of the mental preparations as much as you are the physical preparations.
I think that's a great shout out. Any specific reading that was really helpful for you? Or just a variety of
I did read one book, which I read in college, called The Power of Habit. And it doesn't necessarily talk so much on mental health or mental training, but you can take what they say and apply it, to making sure you're building good routines and getting a good headspace for yourself. But the biggest thing for me has just kind of been yoga, and some meditating and breathing, and it doesn't take more than 10, 20 minutes a day or every other day. And it just kind of, you become very, very present with yourself. And I think as athletes, you have a bad game and you focus on that for a day or two, where it's like, how good are you at just boom, like switching that off and moving on? Or, before a game thinking, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And it's like, if you can get that out of your system, you're going to play so much better if you can just be in the moment, be present, because you've worked physically to have the reaction time and to have the skill set to perform. So now it's just a matter of, my father-in-law always says no brain. And his term is just like, turn off your brain. You don't need that in that moment, because you've already got the skills.
And I appreciate that, as in when you think about, you're talking about yoga, as in the goal is really right to move all of the thoughts away and be in the moment and not think about anything, as in and that's that, okay, well, no brain in terms of how do you switch off? How do you just be in the moment? I can see that spill over and that training for
and
that.
I hope someone doesn't misunderstand me. Like, obviously you need your brain in a game. Like, you need to see how a defense is playing you and react. But, let's say I miss 3 shots in a row. I can't be like thinking about those 3 shots. It's like, I don't have time for that. I need to be thinking, okay, how is this defender guarding me? What scheme are they doing? And that type of stuff. So being present within your thinking.
I think you got that across but I do appreciate the clarification in terms of, okay, you still need to engage. You can't just be like, oh, let's just play and have fun. Right? You still got to be analytical on the field, but not worry about a missed chance or any of that. So that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. That was really insightful.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I want to mention your experience store one more time, in terms of anyone wanting to take this further or have some specific questions, as in how do you prepare? How do you go all about those? There's lots of aspects to check out on the SPRTER app. Also, follow Rasmus on Instagram, rasbach12. We'll link it out. Like him on Facebook, check out the SPRTER app, and support the Breakers right now. I mean, New Zealand basketball is always special, and that little rivalry to Australia and the Australian teams is great to follow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Good luck.
Thank you.
And we'll hope to follow you along on the next steps in the journey.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun today. So
yeah, thanks for joining. Have a good day.
Take care. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.